Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are graced by the presence of one of our own former professors who is now with Istanbul Sahir University. With all the honor, we'd like to invite Professor Abdullah Al-Ahsan to share with us a few words. فليتفضل مشكورين.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala Rasulil Kareem. Honorable Professor Isarji bin Sardin, Mr. Mahmudur Rahman, former advisor, Bangladesh government, Associate Professor Dr. Shukran Abdul Rahman, guest of honor, the Deputy Deans, Head of the Departments, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. As I walked in, I'm sorry, I become so emotional sometimes when I saw Dr. Fauzia. I remember Dr. Wan Sohana, who just passed away a few days ago. Well, this is our life. I joined this university in 1990, and many of our colleagues now were our students at that time. It feels good to be back with this environment where I have spent almost 3 decades. I'm grateful to the organizers for inviting me to this occasion. It's a very noble occasion for me because the kind of work that as a student of history I am supposed to do, Brother Mahmudur Rahman has done that. You see, I was born in East Pakistan, and Pakistan was achieved in the name of Islam. Muhammad Iqbal, who is supposed to be the person who had dreamt about Pakistan, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who came up with his two nations theory, none of them were nationalist, Indian nationalist, Pakistani nationalist. Both of them were followers of Indian nationalism. They thought that Iqbal said, "Sara jahan se, Sara jahan se acha hai, Hindustan hamara." Anyway, I'm not good in quoting Urdu poetry. The point is that he was loving India. But after working with International Congress for decades, both of them realized that it would be very difficult to live with Congress mindset. And it is this which has led to their demand for a separate nation for Pakistan, for Muslims in the form of Pakistan. And after more than 70 years, with the rise of BJP, you can see that their vision was so correct. And it's not only in India. You can see the rise of ultra-rightist nationalists in so many parts of the country, or of the world. And that gives me this, again, brings me back to the idea of Pakistan. Iqbal was a student in spending time in Germany, and Germany at that time witnessed the rise of rightist nationalists. And it is this idea that convinced him that this kind of nationalism without any ethics is not going to be helpful for mankind. Now, when I see history books in Bangladesh, you can clearly see that there is no mention about the achievement of Pakistan in 1947. And that is the major problem of history writing. History has been manipulated so much. Today, we are talking so much about Islamophobia, but Islamophobia is not a new phenomenon. It has been there in the form of some kind of what Edward Said called Orientalism. It has been there. And because Pakistan was achieved in the name of Islam, there were many forces which were actively involved in dismembering Pakistan. And of course, if you look at official papers of Indian National Congress, you will find that Indian National Congress never accepted Pakistan. But unfortunately, we Muslims are we are not very careful about our history. And as a result of that, we have become victim of others' conspiracies. Of course, it is not wise, I would say, to blame others for our own faults. Of course, we have been deceived with some history textbooks, but what we have called here in this university Islamization of knowledge is to correct that kind of perception of history. I mean, if you look at some kind of conspiracies, like just look at the rifle of this New Zealand, the Australian who shoot in the mosque in New Zealand, what he has written on his rifle. And you can see that their grudge against Islam so deep. But we have not tried to correct those perceptions. It is not the responsibility of others. It is our own responsibility to correct it. Unfortunately, I have myself spent almost 40 years in teaching history, and yet you know that the textbooks on human civilization produce some kind of understanding of the worldview which is opposed to our fundamental faith. The fundamental question that I encountered today is our perception of the origin of human history. Most books on civilization would say that we started from one species to another species, a kind of evolution, and a group of people who started the journey of mankind. But the religious texts are saying that, no, human history began with one couple. We have not resolved this worldview in our textbooks. I know that we teach Introduction to History and Civilization in this university also, yet the fundamental textbooks are not free from this kind of biasness. The point I'm trying to make is that we have many things to do. If you think that you are a victim of Islamophobia, you have to address the fundamental problem by producing books that would be acceptable to the mankind, not only to Muslims, but to mankind. And you see that Quran always addresses mankind in this sense. And therefore, again, going back to Iqbal, I see that Iqbal was trying to revive the humanity of Rumi, the universalist. Yes, we are all part of one or another nation. But again, as a student of contemporary history, when we teach nationalism, we say that Hubbul Watan min al-Iman, that kind of ideas were propagated so much during the nationalist movements. But then, after nation states became independent, nation states took different directions away from humanity. What I see in Mr. Mahmudur Rahman's book is that he has tried to bring back that idea of universalism through his book, that yes, I mean, even now, a few minutes ago, he was saying political Islam came to Bangladesh, or the part which is Bangladesh now, in the 13th century. And that Islam was not dividing people. The reason that India was one of the richest part of the world in the 18th century was because Muslims ruled India for 1,000 years. And when Muslims ruled, they more or less followed Sharia. I know that many Muslims were also dictators. Many Muslims also had imposed their will on others. But generally speaking, as a student of history, I can testify you that Sharia allowed human rights. People had the freedom to work, economic progress, educational rights, philanthropic rights were free. And that is why India attracted European traders. So it is our tragedy that we have not been able to tell the world that India was the richest country in the world only because of Muslim rule. And I think Mr. Mahmudur Rahman has tried to give some idea in the context of present Bangladesh that we need to be committed to facts of history, not romanticizing history. So I congratulate Mr. Mahmudur Rahman for his book, and I wish well for everybody who has contributed to this function. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.